So it is time for the press preview. First look at what is on the front pages. And tonight we'll check out the headlines with the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, Jake Wallis Simons, and the Whitehall editor at the Financial Times, Sebastian Payne. Evening to you both. We'll chat in a moment. First of all, let's check out those front pages, starting with the FT. Putin puts nuclear forces on alert, reads the front of the Financial Times as they look at the West's imposed sanctions against Russia's central bank. The Times carries this same headline. Vlad nukes on standby is the headline for the Metro, which also highlights the proposed peace talks between Russian and Ukrainian leaders. The Daily Telegraph runs with the same story. Their headline, Putin issues nuclear threat. Mad Vlad goes nuclear, says The Sun. The Star also has a picture of Vladimir Putin on the front with the headline, madder than a box of frogs. The Guardian says the backlash against President Putin is growing, with a picture of an enormous anti-war protest, that one taking place in Berlin. Dash to the borders is the headline for The Eye as Ukrainians flee their country. More than 300,000 are believed to have left. And The Mirror also has the same story in pictures, a father and a son saying a tearful goodbye at a train station. And let me remind you, of course, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch and listen to us. And I'm joined tonight by Jake Wallis Simons and Sebastian Payne. Sebastian, why don't we start with you? And terrifying headlines, really, aren't they? The Sun going all out with Mad Vlad goes nuclear. Putin raising the spectre of nuclear attack. He says he's putting his nuclear deterrent forces on high alert. I mean, some confusion about what that actually means.
Well, I think what it means in a very simple sense is that the tensions have been heightened significantly over this war in Europe. That the fact is that, this has not gone to plan for President Vladimir Putin of Russia. That the whole calculation, as we've heard from Western ministers, was a quick, sharp war where Russia would invade Ukraine. It would take Kiev, the capital, install a puppet government, and it would all be over in a matter of days or even weeks. And it really has not gone like that whatsoever. Instead, it's been a much more drawn-out conflict. Kiev is still in control of the Zelensky government, and the fighting back from Ukrainian forces has been incredible. And there's been some absolutely astounding footage on social media showing, despite the fact they're being outclassed in power and manpower, they really are pushing back. And so this decision by Vladimir Putin to raise Russia's nuclear weapons to the highest level is obviously very worrying for everyone involved here. And there's quite a lot of mixed interpretations about what this means, that some of the papers tomorrow say this is actually a distraction to try and get away from the fact that Russia is not winning this conflict. It's not going to plan, and it's not actually going to radically change everything. Others, including the Times tomorrow, say this is symbolic of his state of mind. Lots of people think that Vladimir Putin, I think it's the Star that says, madder than a box of frogs. But in the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, has also suggested that maybe his thought process on this whole crisis is not what it should be. But either way, it shows the tensions are rising. It's not going to plan for Russia. And I think, as everybody's just said, people need to keep a calm head at this moment. And we've seen the first indications of some talks between Ukraine and Russia. They've not gone anywhere at the moment, but obviously that would be the best outcome to this whole messy, awful situation.
Yeah, it's been a strange day. On the one hand, the threat of nuclear attack, but on the other hand, both sides agreeing to talk. Jake, let's look at the front of The Guardian. Putin puts nuclear force on high alert as backlash grows, that huge demonstration in Berlin. What are your thoughts? Is this nuclear threat in order to divert attention because he has miscalculated this invasion?
Well, I think in normal times, one would say that a country like Russia would make a nuclear threat really as a bluff. But if you rewind a couple of weeks, everyone thought that Putin was bluffing when he put more than 100,000 troops on the border of Ukraine. Nobody really thought that he was going to take the step of invading. And so I think that adds a sense of jeopardy to these nuclear threats, or the idea of him putting nuclear forces on high alert. I think it's important to drill down to what's actually going on here. Putin is referring to a 2020 announcement by Russia, a new policy announcement, which was that it would reserve the right to use nuclear weapons in retaliation when facing an existential threat from conventional weapons from an aggressor, whether that's the West or NATO, whether that's Ukraine or another country. And it's not clear whether that means the use of tactical nuclear weapons, which is nuclear weapons on a small scale in warfare, which we'd never seen before in history, or something bigger. So there's a sort of intentional vagary here that's been used strategically by Putin to try to instill fear into the Ukrainians and into NATO and the West at large. But it seems like at the moment what is really evoking is a stronger backlash by the Ukraine and indeed by Western powers as well.
Yeah, and Sebastian, just going back to your paper, The Financial Times, clearly Putin has been rattled by the sanctions, hasn't he? And I see that the front of the FT talking about BP unloading nearly 20% of its stake in Rosneft.
Indeed, just before I come on to the BP story, I think it's just worth noting as well that obviously when Russia's financial markets open on Monday, it could well be that its whole economy will spiral into freefall because we've now got global agreement to cut Russia off from the SWIFT banking system that's used for international payments. There was some dispute between European nations about that last week, and they found unity on that. Plus, there's also been moves by several central banks across the world to freeze the assets of Russia's central banks. So economically, that pain is really going to hit tomorrow. And this is symbolized by that story you mentioned on the front of the FT, that BP is selling off its 20% in Rosneft, the Russian oil fund. And that is $25 billion. You cannot underestimate what a huge transaction that is. It's been held since 2013. We also know that Bernard Looney, who's the chief executive of BP, is leaving the board of Rosneft with immediate effect, and another director as well. So what you've seen over this weekend is, first of all, almost total solidarity from the West, which I think Vladimir Putin did not expect. The ratcheting up of sanctions, which is continuing, and I expect will go on in the coming days and weeks as well. And you can understand why it's created that kind of threat on the nuclear weapons front, because in the information war, in the unity war, in the actual war, Russia is losing across the whole board of this, which is not what it expected. And I think that BP announcement will be reflected by many other companies. We know that UEFA has ended the Champions League, is not going to be held in St. Petersburg. And I think all big Western institutions are going to start pulling out and away from Russia very rapidly while this thing continues. And that again will create much more domestic pressure at home for Vladimir Putin. And we've seen some amazing pictures and footage this weekend of the protests in St. Petersburg, which again, and Moscow, it's a very difficult and delicate thing to do in Russia, but it's clear above the board that this is not what Putin had hoped for. And you just have to wonder at this stage, what's the out of it? How does this thing come to a conclusion?
Yeah, he is looking increasingly isolated, isn't he? Thank you both for the moment. Coming up, the exodus from Ukraine as people head to neighbouring countries for safety.